Hi everyone, my name's Koji. I'm an author, indie author, I guess, self-published. I have 4 books self-published on Amazon. Today I wanted to support another indie author by reading their book and doing like a video review on it. And I'm going to come right out and say I really liked the first half of this book. It's called "Help, My Little Sister is Disappearing" by Azure Whitewood. It's kind of a crude but fun adventure mystery story. I did like the first half as rough as it was, and it started out as a positive review, but the second half I have some major issues with. So you'll see that as I go along, and there will be spoilers in this review, so be prepared for that. I'll let you guys know when there's going to be some real major spoilers, but I'll start out with just kind of like a brief outline. You can see here I have these little markers on the book to indicate kind of like points of interest. Not all these are bad. Most of them are, but not all of them. And they have things written on them, so you can see the beginning, just little question marks. So like maybe something that was a little confusing or could have been clearer, could have been better done. When you get to the second part, it looks a little different. So, got a lot of no's here, no, bad, no. So, just so you know where this is going, the direction it's going in. I guess I'll start with like a little brief plot summary of what this book is about. The main character's name is Hinata, which I believe is like a unisex Japanese name, because I've seen it like in anime and stuff used for both male and female characters. But Hinata Shiraishi, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. The main character, so it's this Hinata Shiraishi and his sister Asuka, and their siblings in what I believe is Japan. It doesn't specify where the story takes place. It kind of takes my approach where, like, my books, for the most part, take place in like an unnamed Midwestern kind of suburb city in America. And this doesn't name the place either, but it doesn't really say what country it's in. But I'm assuming it's Japan because there's like little references here and there, like train stations, and they go to a shopping mall at one part, like a shopping center, and the way it's described kind of reminds me of how the shopping centers were set up in Japan. There's also brief mention of an idol concert where people are holding glow sticks. You don't really see that in other parts of the world. Hinata and Asuka, his sister. There's also a club that Asuka, the little sister character on the front here, is part of, and I believe it's a tea time club, which sounds fantastic. I don't know if that's a thing. If it's not, it should be. The characters in the tea time club they also become more major characters as the story progresses. So it starts with just kind of describing this sibling pair and their normal daily life, and the little sister Asuka. I'm assuming she's kind of 15, 16 as far as age goes, but she's still sleeping in the same bed as her brother when you start off. So immediately, that might kind of creep some people out. I'm not as squeamish as most people are to this kind of thing. So she sleeps in the same bed as him, and he like cooks for her and stuff, and they have a very close kind of like lovey-dovey sibling relationship that you won't really see in real life. But for a book that's inspired by like anime and whatnot, it's kind of expected. They kind of go about their daily life, and something starts happening where people forget who Asuka is. Like, she's in her classroom, and they turn to her and they go like, "Oh, who are you?" So let me see if I can find a good passage here. So the phenomenon is described like this: a wave spread across the classroom, and everyone turned around to look at Asuka. She, however, was too overwhelmed with the situation and couldn't answer anything in return. What is she doing here? How did she get in? Who is this girl? So that's the fellow classmates talking aloud. and asking who she is. The volume in the classroom went louder as her classmates started discussing why she was inside their classroom. It was I think that's supposed to be as if, Asuka never was a member of this class to begin with. From one second to the other, none of her classmates were able to recognize her anymore. So it starts off with people forgetting about her, and eventually people just stop seeing her entirely. She becomes invisible. As you can see from just that little part that I read, Azure Whitewood is a very, what's the word to describe this, kind of idiosyncratic writer. I would say he over-describes things. Like, he'll describe it once in one way and describe it another way immediately afterwards. There's a lot of redundancy in his writing that I think he could cut down on. It's more like methodical and less flavorful. You know, there's this really good quote I liked from the author Bukowski. I haven't actually read any of his works, but I heard this interview with him where he made a really good point. He said, as someone who was bored with other writers, who got bored easily, he said you wanted every line to have its own character and to have a punch to it. And I think Azure, if you're watching this, which you probably will watch it if I tag you in it, I'm assuming. I mean, that's how indie writers are. I think you could kind of borrow a bit from that and try to add some more flavor to this. Like I marked out one passage here that I think really kind of sums up the problem pretty well, so I'll read it. Her homeroom teacher repeatedly wrote something on the blackboard and then turned around to explain what he had written to the students. So you don't have to, that's like a very formal way of writing that. It's kind of overly descriptive. There's a lot of different ways you can say that without being so kind of stiff with the writing style. So that's kind of one of the first issues I had with the book. But I can look past that if the story is entertaining enough, which I thought it was for the most part for the first half. It was I liked hearing about finding out more about this mysterious occurrence that's going on, this phenomenon where she's disappearing, and figuring out the different rules surrounding it. So you can't just vanish someone out of reality. There has to be there's ramifications of that need addressing, and I think Azure does a pretty good job at coming up with like mechanics to this kind of like paranormal phenomenon that he's created. It turns out when a person disappears from this reality, they're replaced with another person. The person that replaces Asuka is her brother. So instead of her being one of the founding members of the Tea Club, it's her brother, and then everyone's memories they change to reshape her on this new reality, which it's a fun idea, and I think you could do a lot with it. Like there's one part where I was wondering how this happens. Like I think it could have been described. It would have been more helpful to describe stuff earlier before they start going out on adventures, because then you're left wondering like, oh, how does this work? But he does end up explaining it for the most part later on. There was one part where they go on a trip to see like anyone who may be able to see Asuka other than her brother. They end up in a different city. They take it like a little trip, and she brings a backpack with her. And so she brings a backpack with her, and I was kind of wondering like, how does that work? She gives it to her brother, and then her brother's wearing the backpack, and I was like, so did like a backpack materialize on him? Did it just like appear out of thin air? But I guess the way it describes it later on, which would have been more helpful early on, is that people forget about objects after Asuka picks them up. So, like she could pick up like a can of coffee, and then people will forget that can of coffee even existed. It will just be like wiped from their memory. I mean, it's not the most foolproof way of describing how this works, but it does, for the purposes of the story, it does work fairly well. One of my biggest gripes with the first half is that Asuka, even though she's one of the primary protagonists of the story, she's not given much of a personality. I did mark out like a little bit here where I think it's a small example, but I think it's kind of indicative of the overarching problem that Azure has. Eventually, the day had to continue despite what happened. Hinata had prepared dinner. He took some extra time and effort to make her favorite. He hoped this would help her mood, but it didn't. Now, doesn't describe what her favorite meal is, which, even though it's a small detail, it can add to a character. People like to know what characters like, what they dislike, what their favorite food is, things like that, you know. And I think adding just more details here and there about her personality, you know, she's just described as like a girl who likes her older brother, which that's fine if that's like the main kind of driving force behind your story, but it doesn't make it very flavorful, and it doesn't make a character that people are going to remember and, you know, even like. I mean, Asuka seems like a, you know, a sweet girl in the story, but like there's really no, like, I don't feel much attachment to a character who's just serving as an archetype for a story. Some of the other characters, though, a bit more dynamic personality wise. The other members of the club kind of they fulfill certain archetypes that are a bit more dynamic. For instance, one of them is like a rich girl, but she's like super clumsy. Another one is a pop star. She's like an idol, but, you know, when she's with her friends, she's just like a normal person, and, you know, she's kind of got this like dual life thing going on, which I don't think it's explored enough as much as I would like, but it's in a better direction than the two main characters. I think even Hinata, his character personality is just like a good guy Greg. Like, he's just a nice guy who wants to help everyone out, which I'm guilty of too, to a certain extent with some of my main characters. But it's the same with Asuka. Like, I just didn't know what he liked, what his personality was like, what is, I don't even think it mentioned any hobbies or anything really. Hinata's best friend is a guy named Kaito. His personality is defined by, basically, he's a ladies' man kind of archetype. It doesn't really show in his demeanor, or it doesn't describe his looks either, so we don't really know if it describes him as cool looking, I guess, and a few times some characters comment on how he looks cool. But as for his personality, there's nothing really remarkable about it, nothing that stands out, other than there is a scene where one of the other girls in the class that attends class with Hinata, she ends up becoming invisible too. And it turns out Kaito can see her and remember her and everything. Hinata invites Kaito to his house to see her, and like all Kaito can talk about is like, oh, so are you dating this girl? Or do you want to, you want to do it with her, I guess. So here, let me find a little passage here. So this is Hinata talking. I want to try something out. Could you come along after school? She's currently over at my place. Are you free? She's at your place. I thought something was unusual when you were interested in a girl. It's not what you think. So do you want to come? If it's directly after, then there's no problem. Besides, she kind of took my interest. A girl that disappeared for everyone except just a few. But I have a date 2 hours later. Just to make things clear, I'm not inviting you over to ask her out on one. I just want to test if you're able to see her. So, Hinata is explaining that the fabric of reality is kind of coming apart in front of them, and people are disappearing. All Kaito can think of is going on dates with girls and, getting his dick wet. And that continues, actually, because he does go to his house and he's able to see her. And, he does comment on how strange it is, but he forgets immediately after. And he even encounters Hinata later in the book, and there's no mention. He doesn't even ask for any updates on, he's like, that invisible girl that's at his house. He didn't ask, like, hey, so is that weird, like, invisible girl still at your house? What's going on with that? There's no concern. He just wants to get to his dates on time. I don't know if he's supposed to be kind of a dunderhead, or if he's just a huge dick, or he's selfish. I'm not sure what's going on with him. But he's not a very likable character. I think he's meant to be likable. I don't think he is. It rubbed me the wrong way, the way he acts. There's like little bits and pieces here that were good. Like they go on that, Asuka and Hinata go on a trip together. They go to a water park, which is very inconvenient with her being invisible and all. I think that part drags on a bit too long, but it does help establish some of the rules of the paranormal stuff that's going on. There was one really good segment where they're in like the shopping center, and she gets trapped and she gets really scared because the automatic doors sensors don't see her. So she ends up getting trapped in the store, and she gets lost, and she can't find her brother, and it's a pretty good moment. But yeah, the water park part gets weirdly sexual in a few bits, which it seems forced. But if you're writing like a little like saucy comedy adventure, I suppose it's appropriate. You know, if that's the kind of book you want to write. Like I said, I'm not squeamish about that kind of things, about those kind of things, but it does feel a little bit forced. But you know what? Fair enough. Like I was fine with it. Halfway through the book, though, it does take a bit of a turn. I'm gonna read a little good section before I get to the bad. There is a part where the idol girl named Yui, Hinata has like a little confrontation with her in like near a lake, I guess. So like he tells her about his sister, and she goes, "Well, I'll probably forget about this, so meet me at this lake at midnight, I believe." Which, like, Azure didn't describe it right away what the lake was, but then like a few pages later he does. So it was a little confusing, but I'm glad there's some exposition there at least. There's a little section where he has a talk with her, and it kind of elaborates on her character. So Yui felt better after hearing his sincere words. She looked at the clear water and started telling him. "It calms me down, drifting on the quiet water, looking at the moon with no one around. I like being an idol and making people happy, but even at school, no matter where I go, people are aware of me. Coming here gives me the feeling of being completely alone. No one is looking at you, no one's whispering about you. No one knows you're there. That's all. Not very interesting, is it?" Hinata looked at the moon. "I never thought about how it must be being an idol. It is not a world I will ever experience. In the end, I'm just like the others." So I put like a little sticky note here, so it just says good. I like this part. It elaborates on her character, her problems. I got the feeling that she has like, I got like some real emotion from this scene, and it didn't feel too forced or anything. There is another part later in the book featuring the same character, Yui, where she's reading a manga, and the manga happens to be about a brother and sister who fall in love with each other, and it's like a tragic story where they're not like they can't express their love for each other because it's not accepted for a brother and sister to love each other. So you just gotta like quietly have these feelings and just, you know, never do anything about them. So this kind of describes what her feelings were after reading the manga in question. For her, this topic had never played a role in her life. She didn't have any siblings, but she could understand how painful such a forbidden love must be. She had never once before thought about this. If someone had asked for her opinion on the topic before, she probably would have replied with the publicly correct, I think it's supposed to be politically correct, answer that love between siblings was wrong. But after reading this manga, this wasn't the case anymore. So this was the first time I wrote like a big no on one of the notes. It's fine if you want a character that believes that incestuous relationships are fine. You know, like you can have a character in a book that believes anything. You could have a character, like I could put a character in a book that's like a huge communist and denies that the Holodomor happened, which in like, you know, that's the character, what the character believes doesn't mean I endorse that idea at all. You know, it's not my endorsement of like, you know, Stalinism or something. It did kind of like set off like some alarm bells for me. Like I didn't want the book to go in this direction, but it did. And it didn't just double down on it, it kind of tripled down on it. So let me fast forward just a little bit. All right, this is going to be like the big spoilers. So, you know, if you're really bothered by spoilers, if you plan on reading the book and don't want to hear like, you know, the twists and turns and stuff before reading it, then you can skip to the end. I guess I'll put like my final verdict. I'll put it like right here or something. I don't know. I'll insert it in the video, I guess. And if I forget to do that, I'll just put it in the description or something. So here's where like the book really kind of like reveals its shows its hand, so to speak. So Yui confronts Asuka about the love for her brother. I believe the reason why I remembered you. Okay, so she reads the manga and then she remembers that Asuka exists. So I should specify that. I believe the reason why I remembered you was because this manga changed my perception about brother-sister love. Before, I didn't really think about it, and if somebody had asked me, I would have answered like everyone else. It's wrong. But after reading this manga, my answer changed. I wanted to support the little sister. She wasn't allowed to love someone just because it was her brother. That is wrong. Love cannot be a bad thing. Alright, so this is when I... this is when I really just kind of started not liking the book very much at all. Around this point is when the book goes out of the realm of just like a fun mystery adventure and goes into moral philosophy and kind of comments on the moral structure of society in ways that I don't think Azure Whitewood is really equipped to, or this, especially in a book like this, you know, it's not really the place to handle such a discussion. I mean, here, let me find some more parts. All right, so here's another passage where Yui talks about her approval of brother-sister incestuous relationships. It wasn't because I read it, talking about the manga. It was because I could empathize, it says emphasize, I think it's supposed to be empathize, with the little sister and change my opinion about forbidden love, or rather, I formed an opinion. Essentially, it's like this. When someone doesn't have an opinion of a topic, then he will go along with what everyone else thinks. If someone had said to me before that love between siblings is wrong, I probably would have agreed, but after I thought about it and formed an opinion, my answer is different now. So it wasn't necessarily the manga, but my formation of an opinion. Of course, if the manga didn't depict this topic in such a tragic and unjust way, things might have turned out differently. That's how easy our opinions are influenced. So in the end, it is a matter of what people think. There probably are a lot more people out there that can see Rin and Asuka because they have their own opinion that is different from everyone else. I have a serious problem with this passage right here. So the character is claiming that she changed her entire outlook on, you know, incestuous relationships because there's like a manga that portrayed it in a tragic way and pulled on her heartstrings. She says, well, that's how easy our opinions are changed, but that's really not how reality works at all. I was reading a book recently by behavioral psychologist Jonathan Haidt, where he created this process, this experiment where he did what he called moral dumbfounding. So essentially, it goes like this: he comes up with several scenarios where it would activate someone's emotional response, so it would disgust them or show some kind of disrespect, and then he would but he would specify that no one was hurt or injured or got sick or anything. So for example, a man buys a raw chicken from a supermarket every weekend, and he takes it home and thaws it out, and then he has sexual relations with said chicken before cooking it and eating it. No meat is wasted or anything, and he has a fun time doing it. Do you think this is morally wrong or not? Another such situation actually did involve the topic of incest. Not really incestuous relationships, but just incestuous sex, where it's a brother and sister. They go on a holiday in France. While they're staying in a hotel, they decide, well, wouldn't it be fun to have sex? And so the sister is on birth control. The man uses a condom, and they have a good time doing it, and they never do it again, and they keep it a secret between them, and it brings them closer. So like I said, he specifies that no one's hurt, and there's no damage to their relationship at all. Is it morally wrong or not? And so he would ask these to college students, and they would be morally dumbfounded, is what he called it. They wouldn't be able to justify their moral disgust, you know, or their dislike of something, and would even sometimes invent victims and say, well, maybe there is someone who got hurt in this, and, you know, but you just didn't specify in the story. what Azure Whitewood is describing in this book is something similar to Kohlberg's theory of moral rationalism, which basically the premise of that is people are rational. They develop morals as they age through discovery and through rationalization. So you rationally come up with your morals as you question the reality around you. The idea of like social convention or taboos, as they're called in this book, and I'll get to that later. It's part of like a stage. So you end up getting kind of like indoctrinated by society into believing these social conventions, and then as you question them, you can grow out of them and go to the next stage of rational morality. But what Jonathan Haidt describes is moral intuition. So basically, people either are born or they have these like emotional reactions to things drilled into them, and they rationalize them afterwards. And what Jonathan Haidt believes is that people feel emotions first for like morality. They feel their emotions first and they rationalize it later, and that goes for almost everything. So these people in his moral dumbfounding experiment, even though they didn't have a good explanation for why they felt morally disgusted or that things were, generally morally wrong, they still believed it. And that didn't go away just because they were morally dumbfounded or because they were probed and asked to form an opinion about something. They honestly did believe that these things were morally wrong. They just couldn't explain it. It's very hard to change someone's moral outlook on something. It takes a lot of time, a lot of reflection, and it usually has to come from someone that person trusts. You could portray something in media as like tragic. So you say this, like the instance used in this book, there's this couple of siblings and they love each other. They can't do anything. How tragic is that? You can pull on people's heartstrings and activate their care response, and that can sometimes kind of sway person in a certain direction. But you're going to have to be someone who is already kind of predisposed to that kind of moral axis. So I'm going to skip forward. So back to this book, enough of me ranting about moral psychology. They actually reveal, so Asuka reveals her love for her brother, and her brother like accepts it and everything. But they explicitly do not start dating at this point in time. Eventually they reveal to their friends, like, oh, well, they're in love with each other. Yui's the one who spills the beans on that. So she says, of course, they're heads over heels with each other. Hinata and Asuka looked at Yui in disbelief that she just declared their relationship like it was nothing. Then that's why the story made us remember. Kaito totally ignored the blushing couple next to him. I think this club activity will be one that we'll never forget. Not even a strange phenomenon can make us. They make the other characters read this manga that Yui read, and they're just fine with incestuous relationships right now. They proclaim that these two, this brother and sister pair over here, they're in love, and nobody really bats an eye at that, which is a really weird reaction. Even if you were swayed by like a tragic manga about this kind of thing, which doesn't, like I said, doesn't really happen much in real life. I doubt you would just suddenly be okay with your friend dating his sister. You can see the book is kind of going, it's really tripling down, quadrupling down on this point and going firmly in this direction. And I hate to say that the ultimate answer to to how to solve this mystery that the book presents of these people turning invisible, the ultimate cure for it is to convince people that taboos are okay, particularly incestuous relationships. Now there is the other character, Rin, who is the classmate who went invisible, like his sister, and her problem was that she was doing a babysitting job outside of school, and someone found out about it and reported it to the principal. So she got in trouble for because that's against their school policy for a kid to work while they're attending the school. But everybody spread rumors. There were rumors spread that she was a pedophile and that she like molested girls and stuff, and so that's why she disappeared. And I think the irony of Rin's story is that it didn't have really anything to do with her breaking a taboo, and let's say in this case it would be pedophilia. It was that there were rumors that she had broken such taboo, not that she actually did it. So while Azure Whitewood is arguing against these social conventions or taboos, he's not dedicated enough to that premise to actually argue for certain taboos that I think he would agree are pretty bad, you know, like such as pedophilia. Like taboos of that severity aren't really even mentioned in here. You know, like you could list off a ton of social taboos that I think most people would agree should probably stay that way, such as, you know, like cannibalism and necrophilia and whatnot, and a whole bunch of real gross, nasty stuff. While he does have this premise where like taboos are bad, he doesn't commit himself to such a premise because I think he realizes that once you open up that can of worms, there's a lot of nasty stuff inside, and that kind of defeats the whole point that the book is trying to hit home. Because so to cure Asuka's her problem, everyone has to be convinced that it's okay for you to break this certain social convention, and you can see he actually, the main character does this. He accomplishes this by giving a speech, in front of the whole student body during their like class, student council elections. And also the formatting kind of like craps the bed here. By the way, Azure, for your future books, we need more gutter space here. It kind of made it hard to read sometimes. You had to open it pretty wide, so got to get more gutter in there. But the formatting kind of craps the bed here, and it becomes like kind of like a text wall. So he gives this speech in front of the student body. You can keep your feelings locked up inside, but they're still there. So what will you do? Is it only that when you realize the true nature of taboos, only when your secret comes out and you feel the unjust consequences? Or will you take the decision in your own hands, breaking free from the shackles that have been put on you by a stranger? It's not very clear what kind of point he's trying to make here. This could have been way better written, even though I disagree with the entire premise of it. Do you think you'll have the power to think for yourself? Do you think you'll be able to start questioning all the things that you've been taught before you learned that not everything said is true? Do you have the strength? I want to believe so. So he's basically telling people like, oh, well, if you believe in these taboos and like social conventions should stay, then you're just not thinking for yourself, I guess. Please be proud of the things you like and be happy for other people that like different things. Please become part of a world where everyone is free to like anything without the fear of rejection. Please be a part of a world without taboos. Thank you. So that's the ending of his speech. Then like some students come up afterwards and talk to like Asuka and Hinata and go, oh, we approve of your relationship now. And the whole thing kind of reads like Azure had kind of like self-inserted himself here, and this is what he would say, and it reads like and everyone on the bus clapped story. Not only that, but so let's give him the premise that incestuous relationships are harmless, which is questionable at best. Can there be a world without taboos? I very much doubt it. I think, particularly with things like the incest taboo, a lot of this stuff is kind of ingrained in us through years of evolution. It's spurred on by biology and biological urges and things like that. And you can trace a lot of the origins of these taboos and kind of different moral axes, like sanctity and like the feelings of disgust you get from seeing disrespect for hierarchy and things like that. You can trace a lot of them back through evolutionary pressures that were placed on humans. So even if you did manage to convince people that incest was harmless, and then after you managed to convince them that to throw away all their taboos and preconceived notions about these things. Even then, you would not be able to eliminate these things. They would reemerge because they're, you know, ingrained in us. I believe this is called moral foundations theory. But like I said, it seems like the thinking about morality from Azure Whitewood's thinking about morality it's overly simplistic. It seems kind of antiquated, and it only relies on one particular moral axis of autonomy and liberty, and it kind of disregards everything else. And then at the end, Hinata accepts Asuka's offer to go out with each other, and they're in a relationship, and everything's kind of fine. And at the end, I'm just left wondering, like, you know, what's the couple gonna do? Are they gonna tell their family, "Hey, we're dating now"? Yeah, us brother and sister. I mean, that's cool, right? You know, they gonna get married. They're gonna convince Shinzo Abe that it's good. You know, like, most people aren't gonna appreciate this kind of thing. It's not gonna be acceptable just because you made some kind of fancy speech. So yeah, I wanted to like this book. I really did. In the first half, while the writing was rough in some places, there's a lot of typos. I still had fun reading it, and I wanted to learn more about this, like, you know, these paranormal events that were happening to these characters. But I have to say, I do not like the last half at all. If you wanted to have an interesting debate about taboos and social conventions, and, you know, try to convince people of that rational morality is the way to go, you could certainly do that in the written form, but this is not the place to do that. You can't have a debate about these things in a book like this, especially if you haven't done your homework and you don't really have the right vocabulary to talk about it. So, would I recommend this book? It's honestly, it's kind of hard to recommend. If you agree with the premise that the book puts forth, and you're a moral rationalist, which I certainly am not, then you're gonna like it more than me, obviously. And obviously, you can't be squeamish. I mean, if you're just look at the cover, and you're gonna know if you're in the demographic for this or not. I thought I was, actually, but like here's my first book. Like, I honestly, like my first book was a crap pile. So, like, there is room for improvement here. I think once you become more kind of like, once you write more and kind of become more comfortable with the medium, and kind of loosen up on your prose a bit, kind of make it more flavorful, I think you're capable of making some good stuff. This is a creative book, has some really interesting concepts in it, but I think you can do better, and just try not to wade too much into the realm of moral philosophy and psychology and things like that. I remember my friend, I gave this soon after writing it. I gave it to one of my friends, and she told me it was too creepy. It was her first impression. So yeah, I don't recommend the book unless, like I said, unless you agree with the premise, then you're probably gonna like it. But like I said, it's really hard to recommend. So I thank you guys for watching. This is probably going to turn out to be a pretty long video because I ranted a lot about stuff that barely anyone cares about, probably. But thank you for watching and sticking with me for my first video review of a book. And I hope you guys have a great day. And subscribe, I guess. You don't really have to.